The air inside the Blackstone Conservatory of Dance was thin and cold, smelling of old money, floor wax, and the ghosts of dancers who had starved themselves for a dream. It was an institution carved from ivory and tradition, its hallowed halls lined with portraits of pale, severe-looking ballerinas, their bodies frozen in impossible arches, their eyes silently judging every soul who walked beneath them. Into this cathedral of conformity stepped Amara James. She didn't glide. She moved with a quiet power, a rhythm that seemed to hum just beneath her skin, a warmth that the ancient stone walls seemed to lean away from. She was a silhouette of vibrant life against a monochrome history, her dark skin absorbing the sterile light of the chandeliers and refusing to reflect it back. Her dream was simple, audacious, and, in this place, almost heretical, turned the coveted solo in the annual Phoenix Gala, a performance that launched careers into the stratosphere. She had the strength, the discipline, the fire. But at Blackstone, these were not the only metrics. Here, there was a mold, and Amara was not cast from it. The gatekeeper of this mold, the high priestess of its suffocating tradition, was Madame Du Bois. She was a woman who seemed to be sculpted from ice, her posture so rigid it was a kind of violence. Her silver hair was pinned into a merciless bun, and her eyes, the color of a winter sky, held no warmth, only assessment. She did not see dancers. She saw collections of lines, angles, and deficiencies. From the very first day, Madame Du Bois's gaze would land on Amara and linger, not with curiosity, but with a kind of weary disapproval, as if Amara were a persistent grammatical error in a perfectly composed sentence. The critiques began as subtle, insidious whispers that coiled around Amara's confidence like a snake. In the Barry exercises, while other dancers received corrections on their plie or their turnout, Amara would be met with a sigh. "Miss James," Madame Du Bois's voice would clip the air. "Ballet is about creating an illusion of weightlessness. A line. You must control your physicality." The word physicality was left hanging in the air, heavy and loaded. It was a word she never used for the other girls, the slender, reed-thin dancers who seemed to float on the music. For Amara, whose body was a testament to power with strong, sculpted thighs and graceful, curved hips, the word was a judgment. It was code for wrong. The other students, desperate for Madame Du Bois's favor, quickly learned the tune. They watched Amara in the mirrors, their expressions a mixture of pity and superiority. They saw her power not as a gift, but as a handicap. They saw her innate rhythm, the way her shoulders could isolate and her spine could undulate with the fluidity that was not in any textbook, and they saw it as a lack of discipline. It was too much, too bold. It wasn't ballet. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling adagio practice, Amara was pouring every ounce of her being into the movement. The music was a sorrowful cello piece, and she was channeling it, her arms not just moving through the positions, but telling a story of longing and release. She felt a connection to it, a truth. But then the music stopped. Madame Du Bois stood before her, her arms crossed, her face a mask of profound disappointment. "What?" she asked, the single word colder than the winter draft from the tall windows. "Do you think you are doing?" Amara's chest tightened. "I was dancing, madam." The words came out as a whisper. "No," Du Bois countered, stepping closer. The other dancers froze, becoming a silent, captive audience. "You were moving. There is a difference. Ballet is not about raw, untamed expression. It is about sublime control. It is about a tradition passed down through generations. Your movements, they are too earthy. They lack the ethereal quality required. Your body is not made for this art form." There it was, the unspoken thing, finally given a voice. Not that her technique was flawed, but that her very being, her body, was anathema to the art itself. A girl named Clara, Du Bois's prize protégée, smirked from the corner. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up Amara's neck. She looked around the room, at the pale faces watching her, at her own reflection in the vast mirror, a strong, capable black woman in a sea of sameness. and for the first time, she felt like an imposter. The words echoed in her mind for weeks. Your body is not made for this art form. She began to hate the mirror. She tried to contort herself into the shape they demanded. She ate less, stretching her muscles until they screamed, trying to sand down her curves, to lengthen her lines, to erase the very power that was her birthright. Her dancing became brittle, technical, and hollow. The fire in her eyes dimmed too. A pilot light, flickering and weak. The only person who seemed to notice was Mr. Elias, the conservatory's pianist. He was an old man with kind, weary eyes and hands that spoke a language more profound than words. He had played for generations of dancers, had seen prodigies rise and spirits break. He never spoke much, but he saw everything. He would watch Amara when she stayed late, long after the others had gone, punishing her body, trying to force it into submission. He would see the tears of frustration she quickly wiped away. One evening, as she collapsed onto the floor, her breath coming in ragged sobs, he finished his piece and let the final note hang in the cavernous room. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, his voice, soft as felted hammers on piano strings, filled the silence. The notes on the page are not the music, he said, looking at his sheet music. They are just the instructions. The music happens in the space between the notes. It happens in the soul of the one who plays it. Amara looked up, her face streaked with sweat and tears. He turned his gaze to her. They are trying to make you play only the notes, child, but you have a symphony inside you. His words planted a seed, but it was a seed planted in barren ground. The preliminary auditions for the Phoenix Gala were approaching, and the pressure was immense. The chosen piece was a classical variation from Swan Lake, a dance that epitomized the very qualities Du Bois accused Amara of lacking: fragility, ethereality, a weightless sorrow. Amara practiced it relentlessly, her movements becoming more precise, more controlled, and more lifeless with each repetition. She was a perfect automaton, executing the steps flawlessly. When she performed for the preliminary panel, which included Madame Du Bois, she did everything right. Her turnout was perfect. Her balance was impeccable. Her arms were flawless swan's wings, but there was no soul. After she finished, holding the final, trembling pose, there was a polite, sterile silence. The other judges made a few complimentary notes on her technical skill. Then, Madame Du Bois spoke, her voice laced with a triumphant sort of pity. "Well, Miss James," she began, a thin smile playing on her lips. "A commendable effort. You have clearly worked very hard to rein in your natural tendencies. It is clean." She let the word hang there. Clean, like a scrubbed floor. But the Phoenix solo requires more than clean technique. It requires a spark, a transcendence. And I'm afraid that is something one is simply born with. Or not. She made a small, dismissive mark on her notepad. "Thank you. That will be all." Amara walked out of the room, her body numb. She hadn't been rejected for failing. She had been rejected for succeeding at their own game, only to be told the rules had changed. They had asked her to erase herself, and when she did, they found the empty space wanting. That night, she didn't go home. She went back to the empty dance studio, the scene of her humiliation. The cavernous room was dark, save for the moonlight pouring through the arched windows, painting silver rectangles on the polished floor. She stood in the center of one, a single, lonely figure. She didn't want to dance. She never wanted to dance again. She was about to leave when she saw that Mr. Elias had left his small, personal music player on the piano bench. On impulse, she walked over and pressed play. It wasn't Chopin or Tchaikovsky. A deep, resonant drumbeat filled the studio, a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. It was followed by a soulful, soaring vocal, a song that spoke of struggle and resilience, of roots running deep into the earth. It was the music of her childhood, the music of her soul. She stood there, just listening, and felt something stir inside her, a long dormant ache. Her feet began to move, not in a turnout, not in a pointed toe, but in a soft, grounded shuffle. Her hips swayed, remembering a language they had been forbidden to speak. Her arms, which she had tried to train into delicate, bird-like wings, now carved through the air with intention, with power. She wasn't performing, she was praying, she was testifying, she was remembering who she was. Her dance was a fusion the likes of which the walls of Blackstone had never seen. It was the grace of a balletic arabesque flowing seamlessly into the grounded power of an African stomp. It was the precision of a pirouette exploding into the joyful, unbound freedom of a shoulder shimmy. The moonlight caught the tears on her face, but these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. She was no longer a collection of lines and angles. She was a story, a living, breathing history in motion, and she didn't know it, but from the shadows of the doorway, Mr. Elias stood watching, a slow, profound smile spreading across his face. He had quietly returned for his music player and had stayed, mesmerized. He had seen the notes, and now, he was finally hearing the symphony. The next day, the list of finalists for the Phoenix Gala was posted. As expected, Amara's name was not on it. At the top of the list, in elegant script, was Clara. A wave of defeat washed over Amara, but it was different this time. It wasn't the sharp sting of failure, but the dull ache of an expected injustice. She was packing her dance bag, ready to walk away from Blackstone forever, when Mr. Elias approached her. "They made a mistake," he said simply. Amara gave a bitter laugh. "They don't think so. It doesn't matter what they think," he replied, his eyes serious. "It matters what is true. And the truth is, what I saw in here last night, that was the most honest dancing I have ever witnessed in this building." He paused, then said, "The gala has a tradition, an old one, mostly forgotten. Any student may issue a dancer's challenge for a finalist spot. It's a formal appeal, a dance-off, judged by the full board of directors, not just the faculty." Amara stared at him. "A dance-off? They would never allow it." "Madame Du Bois would." "She has no choice," Mr. Elias interrupted gently. "It's in the conservatory's original charter, a founding principle to prevent bias. No one has used it in 50 years. They've forgotten it exists. But I haven't." A tiny, dangerous spark of hope ignited in Amara's chest. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about being seen. It was about showing them, just once, who she truly was before she walked away. She would not leave as a ghost of their making. She would leave as herself. The news of the Dancers' Challenge spread through the conservatory like wildfire. It was a scandal, a delicious piece of drama in a world of rigid order. Madame Du Bois was incandescent with rage. She saw it as a personal affront, an attack on her authority and her judgment. She cornered Amara in the hallway, her voice a low hiss. "What do you think you are accomplishing with this spectacle? You will only embarrass yourself further. You will be a laughingstock." Amara met her gaze, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes, only a calm, unwavering resolve. "Me," Amara said, her voice steady, "but they will see me dance, the real me, and that's all I have left to fight for." The day of the challenge arrived. The grand rehearsal hall was packed. The full board of directors, a collection of wealthy patrons and influential alumni, sat at a long table. Madame Du Bois was on the panel, her face a thundercloud. The entire student body was there, their whispers filling the tense silence. Clara, the chosen finalist, went first. She was technically brilliant. She performed the Swan Lake variation with a flawless, crystalline precision. She was the perfect Blackstone ballerina, a beautiful, fragile music box dancer. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Madame Du Bois looked down the table with an expression that said, "I told you so." Then, it was Amara's turn. She walked to the center of the floor. She wasn't wearing the traditional white tutu. She wore simple black leggings and a top, her body a clean, powerful silhouette. She nodded to Mr. Elias at the piano. The board members looked down at their programs, expecting the same Swan Lake music. But Mr. Elias didn't play Tchaikovsky. He began with a soft, improvisational melody, a simple, searching tune. Then, from a small speaker he had placed by the piano, a deep, soulful drumbeat began. The same beat Amara had danced to alone in the moonlight. It was a rhythm that felt both ancient and new. A murmur went through the crowd. Madame Du Bois shot a venomous glare at Mr. Elias, but he ignored her, his eyes closed, lost in the fusion he was creating. And then Amara danced. She started slow, her movements fluid and lyrical, rooted in her classical training. She showed them the language they understood, the elegant porte de bras, the soaring extension, the perfect balance. She was proving she knew their rules. But then, as the beat grew stronger, the dance began to transform. She let the rhythm enter her body, not as an instruction, but as an invitation. Her spine rippled, her shoulders pulsed with the beat. She dropped her center of gravity, her feet connecting with the floor, not with the lightness of a swan, but with the rooted strength of a tree. She was telling a story. It was the story of a girl who was told her body was wrong, her spirit was too much. Her movements spoke of confinement, of trying to fit into a box that was too small. Her arms wrapped around herself, her head bowed in a posture of forced submission. But then the music swelled, and so did she. She broke free. With a powerful, breathtaking leap that was part ballet and part pure, unadulterated joy, she seemed to hang in the air for an impossible moment, a figure of defiance. Her dance became a celebration. It was the joy of her ancestors, the pain of her struggle, the fierce, unapologetic beauty of her own truth. She was not a swan, she was not a ghost, she was a phoenix, rising not from ashes, but from the fire they had tried to extinguish within her. The room was utterly silent. No one coughed, no one moved. They were witnessing something they had never seen before, not a performance, but a revelation. Madame Du Bois sat frozen, her face pale, her knuckles white where she gripped the table. She was watching her entire worldview, her entire system of belief, being dismantled before her very eyes by a power she could not name and did not understand. She saw control, but it was self-control, not imposed discipline. She saw tradition, but it was a tradition far older and deeper than her own. She saw a line, a beauty, and a grace that her narrow definitions had rendered her blind to. When Amara finished, holding a final pose that was not one of fragility, but of unshakable strength, her chest rising and falling, her eyes blazing with fire, the silence held for a beat. It was a silence of awe. And then, a single person began to clap. It was Clara. She stood up, her face streaked with tears, and applauded with genuine, unrestrained admiration. Her applause broke the spell, and the room exploded. The board members, the students, they were all on their feet, the sound of their clapping echoing like thunder through the hallowed halls. It was more than an ovation, it was a verdict. Madame Du Bois didn't move. She just sat there, small and obsolete, as the world she had so rigidly controlled shifted on its axis. The head of the board, an elderly woman known for her progressive views, leaned over and spoke to her, her voice too low for anyone else to hear, but the message was clear from the final, horrified look on Du Bois's face. Poetic justice is rarely loud. Sometimes, it is the quiet, crushing sound of your own irrelevance. Amara was unanimously awarded the Phoenix Solo, but something more significant had happened. A visiting choreographer, a legend in the contemporary dance world who was on the board, approached her afterward, his eyes shining. "I don't care about your gala," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have a new piece I'm creating. It needs a heart. I think I just found it. I'm offering you a professional contract with my company. We start in New York next month." Amara stood there, the sound of the applause still ringing in her ears, a professional contract in her hand, and looked across the room at Madame Du Bois. The woman who had tried to break her, who had told her she was nothing, was now the ghost, an artifact of a dying era, invisible in the glow of a new star. Amara didn't feel hatred or even pity. She felt a profound sense of peace. She had not defeated Madame Du Bois by playing her game. She had rendered her and her game completely and utterly irrelevant, simply by choosing to be herself. She had taken the stage, not just of the Blackstone Conservatory, but of her own life, and in doing so, she taught them all the most important lesson in art, that true beauty is never found in conformity, but in the courageous, unashamed, and glorious expression of one's own truth. There are moments in life when the world presents you with a mold and tells you to fit. It tells you that your power is a flaw, that your heritage is a handicap, and that your truth is an inconvenience. The story of Amara James is a testament to the quiet, unshakable power of refusing to be diminished. It is a reminder that the most profound revolutions don't always begin with a shout, but with the simple, brave decision to let your own symphony play, even in a room that only wants to hear a single, familiar note. The stage belongs not to those who guard the traditions of the past, but to those who have the courage to dance the future into existence. If you believe in the power of truth to overcome privilege, and in the justice that comes when true talent can no longer be denied, subscribe for more stories that unmask the powerful and celebrate the strong.